Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a totally different, deeply spiritual framework for raising kids. We're unpacking Chapter 3 of Ryuho Okawa's Hints to Find Happiness, and honestly, it really challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom we're so used to today. It literally asks us to look way past the grades, the behavior charts, the daily grind, and instead view parenting through a profoundly cosmic lens. So looking at this specific book, it essentially asked us to toss out standard secular views of parenting. Instead of seeing a kid as just a blank slate or, a mini version of yourself, it introduces this completely spiritual worldview. It argues that actually understanding the soul of your child is the absolute master key to family harmony. To wrap our heads around this huge paradigm shift, we're going to follow a pretty clear roadmap today. We'll be moving from everyday household expectations straight into profound concepts like reincarnation and spiritual doctrine.
All right, part 1, True Elite Education. We're going to start with how the author radically redefines what elite education actually means, and I promise you, it's probably not what you're thinking.
This contrast here is absolutely brilliant. Normally, we think of elite education as cramming kids full of knowledge, right? The text points out that parents often fall into the trap of treating children almost like property, pushing them just to fulfill their own unfulfilled dreams. But flipping that completely upside down, the source argues true education isn't about forcing facts into a kid's brain. It's about recognizing that the parent and the child are entirely separate spiritual entities. It's all about discernment, not dictation. According to the book, a parent's ultimate goal is to discover what it calls tenbun, which translates to a heavenly gift, or the soul's nature. Think of it as the inherent spiritual direction a soul already brings into this world. So true education seeks to pinpoint this specific predisposition. You want to gently guide the child in the exact direction their soul is naturally pulling them, rather than fighting it just to fit some rigid societal mold.
Now, moving on to Section 2. What actually happens when this dynamic breaks down, especially when you see issues like truancy or kids acting out?
Well, it's super interesting how the book frames stuff like school refusal, truancy, or even domestic violence. The text explicitly states that when these problems pop up, they are almost never just the child's behavioral issues. No, the child is acting as a spiritual mirror. They are literally reflecting the parent's own unresolved struggles, their spiritual state, or even hidden anxieties. And the crucial takeaway here is captured perfectly in this quote. If a kid is acting out, trying to somehow fix them with strict discipline or arbitrary rules, that's essentially impossible. The parent literally has to look in the mirror first. The source insists that parents must rebuild their own lives, self-reflect on their own emotional turmoil, and correct their own path before the child's behavior will ever actually change. It's a tough pill to swallow, but a fascinating perspective. Which leads us directly into Section 3, the trap of false love or over-interference. This is a really fascinating psychological and spiritual concept. The text clearly juxtaposes true giving love against what it calls taking love. Now, giving love is exactly what it sounds like. True, solid support rooted in genuine trust for the child's totally separate soul. Taking love, though, that's a lot more insidious. It happens when parents, completely under the guise of caring, actually micromanage and over-interfere. The text even notes that sometimes parents unconsciously use their kids for stress relief. It's like treating them as a toy or locking them away in a safe but incredibly restrictive birdcage.
To escape this, the book says parents have to actively stop this over-interference. They need to untie these spiritual bindings. The author points out that when parents forcefully push their own values onto a child, acting self-righteous and totally ignoring how the kid actually feels, it sparks this intense feeling of unfairness. That exact sense of being unjustly controlled by false love is precisely what often fuels fierce rebellion and juvenile delinquency.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the meaning of hardship. Here we encounter the text's unique take on disabilities and severe physical challenges within this broader spiritual universe.
So, how exactly does a purely spiritual framework explain the intense hardship of a child being born with a physical handicap or severe illness? Honestly, it's one of the most heartbreaking questions a parent can face, and the source material provides a very distinct, decidedly non-secular answer to it. The author suggests that, from the perspective of reincarnation, a disability isn't some cosmic punishment or random tragic accident. Actually, scratch that. It's viewed more like a special, predetermined training ground. It's an environment consciously chosen by the soul before birth. It's designed for highly specific spiritual growth, a kind of soul's special study that an ordinary easy life just couldn't teach. Plus, the text makes it clear that spiritual success isn't measured by comparing your achievements to someone else's. It's measured by how far the individual soul advances from its own unique, carefully chosen starting line.
All right, finally, we arrive at Section 5. This is the source's ultimate solution for preventing juvenile delinquency and easing societal friction.
The book asserts that the absolute root cause of most youth crime and rebellion is emotional disturbance. And where does that come from? The direct result of a lack of religious education within the family. Now, the text defines religious education not necessarily as shipping your kid off to a rigid institutional school, but as parents actually knowing spiritual truths themselves. It's about actively instilling daily habits of self-reflection, gratitude, and prayer right there inside the home.
To actually put this into practice, the text outlines a few core steps. First off, parents have to learn and understand these spiritual truths themselves. Then, they've got to pass them down naturally, just through daily family life. As the child grows and reaches a certain age of awareness, parents really need to foster a strong sense of self-responsibility. The main takeaway here is that you can't just outsource this to secular schools. Parents absolutely must take charge of their child's spiritual foundation at home to prevent the deep-seated emotional turmoil that leads to delinquency.
So whether you personally agree with this deeply spiritual, reincarnation-based lens on child rearing or not, the source leaves us with a truly provocative thought to mull over. If your child's struggles are truly just a mirror reflecting your own inner life, well, what is your reflection showing them today? It's a really powerful reminder of the profound and often totally invisible impact our own emotional and spiritual states have on the kids we raise. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it gave you a really clear, structured look into a fascinating approach to finding happiness in the home.